Good. All right, just a little bit. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am your host, Tom Kaczynski. We're going to have another show of Tom Unscripted today. I don't have a good monologue developed for you because I'm just kind of looking to jump into it with some of your questions. But I did want to show you some before we got too deep into this. Very proud of this. Give mad respect to Mrs. Dana here. Come Out of Babylon. We finally got the books here. And you know what? I tell you what. If anyone makes a really surprising donation tonight, I'll send you a signed copy, and maybe I'll even send you a surprise copy of something from my library. I get some interesting stuff. I won't tell you what it is, but you'll get a bonus book if you go ahead and do that tonight. So that'll be fun. Or if you send something to the Venmo that is, what's the list price on that? At least $20. So if you do at least, it's going to cost me for shipping. Let's say 25, I'll do something. So the promotional part of the show out of the way. Welcome to the broadcast. It's good to be here over on YouTube, where it's easy to use the materials versus having to record my own videos. You know, just one little aside, for those of you who've been visiting me over at Odyssey, hopefully you've been enjoying the shows. I did a lot of shows recently on issues related to the, how should we say, the glycoprotein at the heart of the controversy, which I think is pretty useful. And I think you'll enjoy that. So I put the show in. I think I spelled that all right. If I didn't, just search on the website. You'll figure it out. And then we say hello to Raven, hello to Patches, hello to everyone who's here. I'm sure you all chime in as we go forward here. And actually, I did, and Raven will appreciate this, I did look that up. It was from 1981 in an interview that, what's his name? Jacques actually did. So I actually have a book of his coming because I wanted to go ahead and reference some things. So, oh yeah, Ollie, we definitely got to give some love to Mr. Sparrow. I don't have all of them within reach here, but I have a young friend of mine who sends us some awesome plates, and even if they're replicas, they're still kind of cool. So let me show you one of them because I can't reach them all, but we got a fun one from Hawaii. Should have the little apostrophe they like to put in there. But Hawaii, from what I hear, is having a pretty hard go. Ryan, good to see you. Hope all is out there in the Golden State. So I have been working my butt off in preparation for what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. And I'm going to be doing, or not tomorrow, Sunday. I'm going to be doing a show. Is that the William? No, that's the Rothbard book. So I've been reading a very strange book, which I will share with you. I've mentioned this before. You can't see it there. It's called Mind War by Michael A. Aquino. And the guy's kind of a crazy cat. He was in charge of a big chunk of the PSYOPs operation of the U.S. Army after Vietnam. One hand, he's brilliant. On the other hand, he's a Satanist, so he's evil. So, and I had an interesting definition of evil. So I wanted to share this because I think what evil is has two components to it. I've tried to really simplify it. Evil involves two things: defying God and denying life. And I think that really is a really cute way to put evil together as a clear thing. And I mention that because we don't have the moral construct to understand the fights we're having. And one of the things I've learned in looking at what we are experiencing in the macro sense is that in a lot of ways, I believe we are now caught up, and that's why I call my show The Last War, in a war against artificial intelligence. And I'll let you decide, and I'll make the evidence actually on Sunday for how much of it is it's acting on its own and us leading it. But if you start studying quantum computing, you learn a really interesting thing. You can look at something called D-Wave computers, and what you would learn is that we now are capable of producing computers whose computational capacity, in terms of the number of things it can consider, is greater than the sum intelligence of humanity on Earth. I'm not making that up. I'll go ahead and do all the math. I already have it, but I'll have to put together little charts and you'll have fun looking at it. So we are living in a world where we coexist with intelligences that we spawned, and I say that lightly because that's a little bit conflicting as well, against which we are now being analyzed. And we'll talk about something called the Sentient World Simulation. You can look it up, Purdue University, 2006, but it's been live for quite a while. It went live in 2007. And basically what you would expect is actually true. Somewhere on some machine, someone has an exact replica of you updated with the things you actually do to predict you as a holistic model of everything you do, everything you think, and everything you want. And that's information warfare, when you can understand people before they act. And when you get into quantum computing, it's actually even trickier than that, because what quantum computing really does is it considers all solutions at once. It's kind of like yes, no, and maybe at the same time. It's literally, it's like if Schrodinger's cat was brought to life and it could live permanently in that half dead, half alive switch of being either. And what you find is because of that, instead of having where classical computing has a, what do you call it? What would say, what's the word for it? You would have a geometric development, growth where it's a 1-to-1 ratio. What happens with quantum computing is it's exponential, right? And so you end up with having it for every qubit you add, you're basically squaring the function, or potentially more if they've developed more advanced computers. I don't even know what they have, right? But you've gotten to the point where, one day Bitcoin miners aren't going to matter anymore because all your security codes can be broken. It's kind of interesting for my blockchain friends out there. Privacy is going to be an illusion in an age of super intelligences that can do things we can't imagine. And so, it really makes you wonder as you begin to think about the question, and this is what we'll opine on in the future episode, what we can do to overcome that. And what I think you have to do is call on the highest intelligence. It will become a battle of faith because the heuristics of artificial intelligence are that it can predict you, because not only can it predict the things you think about, but it understands the things you don't think about that are sitting in your subconscious, that are either culturally driven or psychologically moved or even biologically, and things that you would do that make sense that you just do, or decisions you make you don't even realize you're making. I give you an example. In Come Out of Babylon, I spent basically chapters talking about how our real ideology is technology. We think of it as inevitable, natural, and useful. Those are all choices, and choices with outcomes that are far more meaningful, deep, and developed than anything ideological, than anything, frankly, political or racial or even family related. We trust technology to get us out of our every bit. I mean, think of economics, for instance, the idea that you can have, substitution for anything, and that we literally have built our whole system upon this understanding. And so because we think we can always get out of a jam of technology is the God we've ended up worshiping. And so we created a God in our own image, which was the idea that tools allow us to go ahead and escape work in the garden. Now, look, I've worked in enough gardens to know that it's not the easiest thing. As much as I like to play at being Farmer Tom, the truth is I'm good for a couple tomatoes rather than a whole, yield measured by bushels. All that said, what I think we have to begin to do is realize we have reached the point where our independence has been sufficiently startling that we have created things that now require us to begin to re-embrace our dependence. And now is the time when we need to begin turning back to the Lord, because now we have made things bigger than our ability to understand. We have made things bigger than our ability to compete with. And the question is, and this is really the interesting question of AI, is the one limitation of quantum computing, as best I can tell, is it will answer the question you ask of it. And the question we have to ask is, what did we ask the computer to solve? My guess is, as prosaic as it will sound, is they might have asked it, the globalists in charge, how do we achieve world peace? And this sounds like sort of a silly question, but we've spent some time on this show, as well as the last war, talking about how war is the natural state of humanity, and that we continue to fight one another, and civilizations rise and fall, and people live and die. And so what sort of trade-offs would you have to make to live in a world with actual peace, where people didn't agree but were forced to do so? And the level of manipulation would be astounding, what it would require. And it's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to talking about the way, the very light you're shaped in. The fact that I was, what was I going to say? That if I gave you this show at 7 a.m., you would be much more skeptical and cynical than me talking at 7 p.m. Or if I changed the light up a little bit, you would think of things very differently. If I could make it, for instance, I'm kind of in a sharp light here, so maybe you're more likely to believe and be attentive. If I shut this off and go with something like this, just to give you an example, you'll think, oh man, this is kooky and spooky. The thing is, I'm telling you the same information, but what you find is there's a lot of life hacks that are out there that play different roles that allow you to look at things different way. And what happens is, just like sort of magic tricks, there's a whole bunch of ways in which we're manipulated that we don't even understand happen. And I just picked some easy, low-hanging fruit. There's a lot more complicated ways. And the bad news is the computer, when we are walking around and we are solving solutions in our little analog universe, even though we are quantum computers, what we do is we have to walk around the mountain to see what's on the other side. It can see everything at once and figure its way to the bottom of the mountain or the top of the mountain. And it can do that all at once and then draw up solutions that are beyond our ability to see, where the causality window is broken because it's just seeing a different map than we are. But because of that, the ability and ease with which we can be manipulated is the story of what we're going to deal with going ahead. And what I think we will see is a series of crises that lead to solutions that are imagined, because the way quantum computing works is you present the solution and you ask it to figure out the steps along the way. And that's kind of what we have seen. Now, when you read globalist writings, like the excellent stuff that, I was reading, that Jacques, let me see, go back to what I was reading here. Jacques Attali was saying, this was from 1981, and I want to give some credit to your friend Raven here. I want to read to you what this quote was. That was from an interview. Now, mind you, this is in translation, but I actually read enough French to go back and read it. And this is what they were saying in 1981, and I'm reading this via at Real Richard Bale, B-A-I-L, Richard Bailey's person on Twitter. But I just looked this up because I think this quote's amazing. 1981. And this is by Jacques Attali, who was the advisor to the French Socialist President Francois Mitterrand. In the future, it will be a question of finding a way to reduce the population. We will start with the old, because as soon as he exceeds 60 to 65 years, man lives longer than he produces, and it costs society dearly. Then the weak, then the useless ones, who bring nothing to society, especially because there will be more and more of them, and especially, finally, the stupid ones. Euthanasia targeting these groups. Euthanasia will have to be an essential instrument of our future societies in all cases. We will, of course, not be able to execute people or organize camps. We will get rid of them by making them believe that it is for their own good. Too large a population, and for the most part unnecessary, is something economically too expensive. Socially, it is also much better for the human machine to come to an abrupt halt rather than gradually deteriorating. We won't be able to pass intelligence tests on millions and millions of people, as you can imagine. We will find something or cause it. A pandemic that targets certain people, a real economic crisis or not, a virus that will affect the old and the weak. It doesn't matter. The weak will succumb to it, and the fearful and the stupid will believe it and ask to be treated. We will have taken care to have planned the treatment, a treatment that will be the solution. The selection of idiots will thus be done by itself. They will go to the slaughterhouse on their own. So this is the world we live in, and I could go back and I could find you other stories. We could read Carol Quigley if you want to go back further. We could read Klaus Schwab if you want to go more forward. But there is a way, and look, I was in politics, so I can speak to this a little bit. There is a way in which policy planners think, where they look longer term, and we're all guilty of it. Look, I would say that if I knew it would save one soul, I value one soul above a million lives. And why do I say that? Because the soul lasts forever and time exists beyond. But, you start to get into the mathematics of metaphysics, and it gets really tricky, and you have to decide what you believe. And that's really why every argument is an ethical one, and why you have to lay your ethical premises at the very front of it. Mine being, of course, to serve the Lord Jesus Christ. But we don't have ethical premises anymore in the West. We surrendered them long ago. I mean, Aquino makes that clear in his work, but you could see that in anything. I mean, really, we have a country today that hates God and pretends men and women are interchangeable parts. I mean, to be so perverse and corrupted from nature. I genuinely am tempted to write an autobiography, call it My War Against the United States. And it's not because I want to be. Lord knows I hate drawing attention to myself, but this is an evil land. This is an evil country, and we are enabling things. And it's not just this land. It's the fact that we live in civilizations now where we glorify our own wisdom, and we think we can solve any problem with a hack, with a workaround. And now we are investing machines and other intelligences that we don't understand with the tricks we have been endowed to be used against us. To what end? And we're just going to trust it works out for the best. Now, fortunately, as a Christian, we know the Lord says he's going to come and save us. And while I don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, I do believe the Lord is a man of his word, and he will be here to help us. And I believe that battle is far more imminent than people are even beginning prepared to understand, especially when you start to understand some of the things that's happening with quantum computing. I mean, I'll give you an example, just one example you'll appreciate. Like, take CERN, for instance. They're adding an extra particle accelerator in there for a gun. So what they do is they use Tesla's physics. They create a stream of plasma, and they shoot protons into it to create reverberation. They're making plasma into a wave. So it's sort of like saying that you have a water turbine in the Hadron Collider and you harness the power of Niagara Falls to go ahead and add extra electricity to see how much you can rip up when you go ahead and find that antimatter. You're looking for those building blocks, the geometry of the universe. And the problem you end up with when you start tearing this stuff apart, you go and find things like antimatter. And we're just, oh, no, it's something that explodes with matter. But what if it has its own attributes? Does anyone ever think of the philosophical ramifications? Maybe they do. They put the goddess of death, Shiva, out in front of it, creation and death. That's how they look at it. And I think it's no accident when you start to study the occultism of it. So what has ended up happening to me is an interesting thing. I find that I have difficulty talking to audiences about the things that are probably most interesting to you, which are more day-to-day things. And the reason why I have this challenge is not because I have any lack of understanding of politics, inflation, and any of these other measures. We could talk about them all day, and maybe one day we will. But what I've come to find is we are now staring down the barrel of an existential crisis for the species that has come through our love of technology. And I feel like having the awareness of this that we do not have. We think these things are coming. We are being conditioned to accept these things. In fact, we are being maneuvered into situations where our own malfeasance, which will be blamed on actors who think they have power controlling this, who I think are being played in turn in all countries and ideologies, will lead us to giving more power over the one gift we do have, which is we are quantum computers in our own right, which is to say we have souls and that the Lord invested us with the Comforter, the Holy Spirit. And we can choose to surrender that, but we shouldn't. And so what I find I have to do is begin understanding the contours of this challenge and telling people about it, saying that now is a time where people who understand this, you are in an individual fight to protect your spirituality against a world that is trying to manipulate you into believing that you must surrender it for some other cause that is being artificially gamed, programmed, and simulated in real time to make you do the same. The vaccine is one example of it. The inflation problems that are coming out are another one. We could go into the details of it, and I will try, especially over there at The Last War, to put some of that context and construct together for you. But what I will tell you also is that we will now need to begin working on our plans for Exodus to build a society where we can escape these things and take care of one another. Otherwise, we will not succeed. And that could be a personal choice. It's an individual commitment, or it could be collective effort. And I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm just here to tell you why it must be done. And the longer you wait, the more you will see compliance begin shifting people from the idea of sovereign individuals to nodes in an artificial network. Why you think certain collectivist philosophies are emphasized, or why we always, allow technologies to proliferate. So these are some of the things that I am very focused on. I am going to do some other shows. I'm going to do one on Lyme disease. I'm probably going to do one on France sliding towards civil war, but I'm looking forward to the AI one. I may do another one on cryptocurrency. Got to do some more research on that. And we'll try to put some really interesting content out there you're not getting anywhere else. And I'm going to dig deep into my own brain to try to survive and give you some logic. Now, this is stuff you're not going to find anywhere else. You're not going to hear anyone else because people don't understand it and they don't want to look at it. It's ugly. It's painful. I'm not here to make you happy. I am here to be your metaphysical kick in the balls, or kick in the ovaries if you prefer. Will be ecumenical. That will make you aware of the challenges before you. But I will tell you, you're more likely than not to learn more from the Bible than you are from me. So take at least as much time reading that. Maybe it's a good day to take a good look over at Daniel 11 or something like that. So those are some of the things I work on. And I will tell you, I am overclocking my brain like crazy these days because I don't know how much time we have before things reach points where there's nothing we can do at this point, if I'm really honest about it. But we still have options for self-preservation that I believe are more or less optimal. And I think those are worth discussing. I think that, in the medium term, I would expect we're going to see another crisis that will increase our dependency on the systems in general. I do think the economic one might be the next one up. Maybe we see a currency crash. We certainly are seeing inflation come forward, and maybe we'll see governments move toward direct distribution. One of the things that happens with all the small businesses being gone is you don't really know a guy. The corporations are on board, and the bigs that we've been buying from, like Amazon, create centralization of distribution in a way that is actually really useful if you're going to have control over people. So inflation is coming. We know that. Soybean prices are going up like crazy. And in fact, we are seeing an artificial bubble being created in gas by the sort of crazy policies of the Biden administration. But it's part of a global plan. I mean, it's just one of those things. So you better get more supplies of what you need and what you want. I think that's really going to be important in the near future. Your first priority should be fresh water access. And from what I am reading, there's a lot of issues with fuel transport starting to happen out there. Maybe I can find more details on it. We'll see. I just have to have time to do it. And it's hard because I will tell you one other thing, and I'd love some feedback on this question. I'm going to, at your request, record the audiobook of In God We Must, as well as Come Out of Babylon. So if you have a preference as to order, I'm tempted to read them in the order they went. I should let you know I hate reading my own work, and when I read it, I will probably change a couple things because when you read things aloud, it just sounds better. So if you get a little hip or hup, that's what you get from having an author read his own work. It's my least favorite part of the editing process, actually, because I think I sound like a moron. I know I'm not, but it's just one of those things where you always feel like you could have done better or said better, or, if you're a perfectionist, kind of like I am. So those are bits and pieces that I wanted to share with you. And beyond that, what I wanted to say is tonight's show, as always, is all about you. So if you have interesting questions, put them up here. You get a longer show that way. I have more fun, so I'm more likely to come back. And the schedule for next week is, I think you will probably see, I've been trying to do Monday and Friday drops mostly, or maybe Monday and Thursday or Saturday drops on my episodes. Next week, you're going to see Sunday and nothing until at least Wednesday after that, just because we got some things going on here that are going to take up my time. So other than that, I hope you are having an excellent and wonderful evening. So I'm going to go through, see what you all have here, and see if you guys have anything good for me, and hopefully you do. So let's see. We got, what is the sum of 12,346, 345, and 178,564, 876? Let's see if I can do this in my head. And it looks like we would have 12 and 178 is 190, 190 million. 800, let's see, 190,900,000 something. That's too many numbers for me to do. I used to be able to do stuff like that in my head. I'm getting old. That's terrible. I could actually do it if I sat here, but you guys don't want to watch me go, but I could do it in my head. Let's see who we got. And I said, Ollie, say hi to Dana, everybody. She's over here. Maybe maybe Dana will drop me a question. I would love for Dana to put a question in the chat. We'll see if she does. See if I can compel my wife to do something. She might write something funny, though. You never know. This is dangerous. You don't feel good. Okay. Same old lie. You shall not die equals transhumanists and technocrats. Wherever they go, they tell the same lie. They know that they're going to never escape that they die. They think they are gods, although they are just men. So they find themselves at odds because they're going to die. They just won't admit when. So, all right, terrible poetry from Tom. You don't want me doing poetry jams. Milk Mom, good to see you here. I hope all is well out there in the Silver State. Let's see. I was listening to Red Ice, but I caught this. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here. So you guys are being a little bit quiet tonight. So let's see, what else do I want to talk about that I think is interesting? Give me 1 second, and let's see what's sponsored. Talk about CERN? Yeah. Aren't they supposed to be doing Well, I did. That's what I was mentioning. Yeah, no, we've been following. So, all right, so we'll talk about CERN. So, supposedly, CERN is going to be firing up their additional, basically it's a proton gun, which I've heard from Anthony Patch, who I actually trust in terms of the analysis of this, will increase the electrical ability into the petavolt range, which is an increase of 1,000 of what it's done before. And what he was saying was that they are trying to understand the fundamental geometry at the heart of the universe, because it turns out when you break quarks apart, which is what they're doing, you find really weird things happen because they're not adhering to sort of standard Newtonian physics, right? Classical Newtonian physics. So one of the things that you would find is, and actually Patch think it's the tetrahedron that is the core geometric figure upon which things are built. But when you begin to understand, okay, let me take a step back. How should I put this? Because I'm trying to explain really complex concepts that are hard. If you think of things, all right, you've heard how light is a particle and a wave. And what you find is what determines reactions to things is basically the interaction of particles and waves. For instance, let's use the sense of taste. If you were to look at a microscope about what the sense of taste is, what you would find is your tongue has a certain geometry that differs in different areas, that certain foods have a certain geometry, and basically they tickle you like waves. Just like sound tickles your ear or light agitates your eye, foods tickle your tongue. And so there are certain core resonances that are really at the beginning of things. And it makes sense from a Christian perspective. In the beginning is the word, right? The word is basically the idea formed into motion, where motion agitates into physical reality, and physical reality therefore acts in response to the motion adhered. So when you taste something, you're like, ooh, this is tasty. Or if I taste this water, I'm like, that's easy to have, although I'd rather have like an ice cream cone because I don't know I'm a fat kid with no self-restraint. Although I'm doing better at that. I actually am proud of myself. So I mention all this as precursor to what they're looking at CERN, because what they're basically doing is the same thing they did with the atom, except they're blowing up smaller and smaller things, trying to figure out if there is an absolute minimum point, and figuring out if they blow that up, then they can release something that is truly strange. And part of what comes from that is the idea you're creating portals into other dimensionality. And why is other dimensionality important? Because it gets to a point of things that we can't necessarily understand. And apparently, from what I'm hearing, they're using these AI qubit-like type computers that basically have the computational capacity beyond humanity. So why does this get interesting? This gets interesting because if you imagine, like Descartes did, and before Descartes was one of the last ones who believed it, they had this idea of chain of being. So basically, if you think of angels as real for a second, angelic intelligence is as likely to be as far apart from human intelligence, possibly, as human intelligence is from that of an amoeba. Now, an amoeba couldn't even begin to conceptualize what it would mean to be a human. The same thing begins happening with mega intelligences that have exponentially greater computing power. And yet, when you start creating bodies and beings and entities that have that sort of ability, you're kind of throwing up a big beacon to whatever's happening in the universe, that if, in fact, hey, there is something this big or this powerful here, you're drawing attention to things you know that you may not want to. And, people might believe they're benign. People might believe they're malign. Occultism and esoterica is all about that. But the bottom line is you are changing the fundamental equation. And so what happens when you have some horrible, powerful come in? You're going to need something powerful to protect you. And that's really what people fear is happening with CERN, that portals are being torn into transdimensionality, where this sort of AI beings that are being created would allow for those super intelligences to come and dominate us. So when you hear the horrible things in the book of Revelation at a time that can't be imagined in mankind, or you imagine these sort of things that are super intelligences, this is the functional reality of what this might look like. So it's really hard to describe it, and you sound like a crazy kook when you do so, but it's actually sort of logical if you can work it out step by step by step. And what we have been doing through our love of technology, which is its own form of black arts, is we are creating some, because think about what we are doing is trapping, manipulating, controlling light. It's a sort of illusion, but it's an illusion where we can create these sort of engines, and you create a big enough engine, it's going to do certain things, except you're assuming that we control how it's used, and maybe it won't be. And that's where CERN goes. So anyway, good to see you, Raven, by the way. Hope you have a great show, and feel free, please share it into our community, by the way. I'd love to hear your interview. If you ever want to do one with me, you're welcome to come on, so let me know, because I love, and that goes for some of you other guys too. I know McLean would be real good if he is, and I'm not saying some of you others wouldn't. Just let me know, shoot me a buzz, and we'll do it. If you're over in the Telegram group, we'll put it in here so you can see. This is where my actual hangout is, so this is where the boys hang out, and I put my crazy thoughts at like 2 in the morning. Actually, it's more like 5 in the morning. I go to bed early and wake up early. Let's see. Technically, Joe tells me he's digging the beard. I've been growing mine out too. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to give credit to Dana for the fact if it ever looks good, she helps me sort of maintain it a little bit because Lord knows all I'm good at doing is looking like I belong, up in the hills. Speaking of what, did any of you guys see that the Taliban are now taking over Afghanistan? That took about 5 seconds after we left. They took over 2 bases. Not that, in a lot of ways, they'll probably be more stable. I guess the price of heroin is going to go up worldwide, but we'll see. Maybe they'll dump it on us. We'll see. Let's see. Flashpoint or boiling frog? Boiling frog, man. Absolutely. But the thing is, they don't boil you. They just kind of cook you at like a medium heat. They want you to go ahead and be useful. Their goal is to give you, the goal isn't to boil you, I don't think. I don't think they want to kill us all. I saw this really interesting clip from the 2020 Amazon show Utopia, which is itself a remake of a 2011 one on British television called Utopia, where John Cusack's playing this basically pseudo Elon Musk, Bill Gates type figure, talking about how they engineered a virus to sterilize everyone in that show. Really makes you wonder about resonance with reality. Definitely worth checking up. Look up Utopia 2020 on YouTube. You'll see it. But it does make me wonder that what the goal is of what they're trying to accomplish. And maybe it's just that simple, that they just want to go ahead and control and bring down the numbers. And ultimately, I mean, think of it, whether it's from a globalist perspective or whether from an AI perspective, it's inefficient to destroy useful material. A lot of material goes into a lot of people. Now, some, you could argue are more or less useful, but you could be used as nodes in a system. And to be honest, we sit here, we hold our little things, I'll be on flag on the back of it, and I go and I spend however many hours on here a day. I mean, it'd be interesting to see because it tells you how many horrible hours you spend. Like literally, mine tells me I spent 4 hours on this stupid thing, which is a little misleading because I was cooking and playing music. But in any case, we spend so much time hooked up to that. And I look at the world out there and I'm like, oh, that's just a little distraction from what's reality, which is we're spending time here in front of screens, in front of one another. And how did we get ourselves so far away from things? Why? Because A, that's a lot of hard work and it's more fun to use our minds than our bodies. And so we go and we chase the light, just like Mothman. We're going for the moth memes. Has lamp, as the old meme would say. Dana would love that. She loves moth memes. Anyway, but we are chasing the flickering of the light and we are in risk of getting burned. What else would happen when you go ahead and touch, this much electricity? And it's kind of like that. But what it wants us to do, I think, is just to go ahead and flicker around it and eventually maybe attach us, put a little drone pack on each of us. And that might be the plan for humanity in the days ahead. In fact, I think it is, but who knows? I mean, it's kind of an interesting question. I mean, let's ask the question to you guys. Let's pretend that we have a totally hypothetical, not realistic pandemic at all. Would the global elites, if they had a choice, or the programming they give to an AI, would it be more advantageous to them to kill off the useful drones that listen to everything they say? Or would it be more useful to kill off the people who offer resistance to it? And before you jump to the obvious conclusion, let me throw a wrinkle at it. Imagine now you have the technology afterward where you're going to release future viruses or future, whatever that could go forward, where it's going to destroy things. So would you choose to go ahead and put the higher capacity people into a position where they would have to surrender their sovereignty for survival and that the other people are already gone? Or would you keep I'm not supposed to use the word sheep because it's bad in the Bible. Would you rather have those who are simply mindless followers, let's call them drones, and go ahead and keep them to endure while you get rid of the people who actually, like you, me, and everyone in this chat, have the most talent? And it's kind of an interesting question. Is the preference for an intelligent system to have more drones that have less capacity, or to invest more in those nodes which are actually useful? Like human genius. Human genius only sits at the edge of madness. And the reason why is because, socially speaking, you can't really understand some of the things, and people who understand them can't express them. Every one of us, I like to imagine, in life has had these moments of passing awareness where you know something that's truly brilliant and you can't easily explain, qualify, quantify it. And so you get stuck trying to describe things through metaphor. And, I think the Bible has instruction in a lifetime in politics of teaching me how to describe unlike things by using comparative metaphor. But these are the sort of things you end up with. So we end up with the question, and I notice y'all haven't answered me, that, what do you think the system would prefer? A few people who are of high agency, who, hey, you survived, you get to stay, or a whole bunch of people. And, when you read these things and you read all the predictive programming, it seems like they want a lot of people gone. I worry for the people who have made choices that are foolish beyond my sort of biblical interpretation of things. Even if I'm straight up, let's say it isn't the end times. Let's say that, this super intelligence will just be allowed to dominate us. And that happens. Even from that perspective, you would think that it would maybe prioritize those which have higher capacity if it's trying to use them in some sort of way. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, and it's one at the heart of what might be happening in a hypothetical scenario we should not mention that could be existing right now that might involve a 5-letter virus that sort of just seems to spike its way through people. I don't know. All right. World Economic Forum, a new billionaire's investment in Bitcoin. Thoughts? I'm seeing manipulations just like the old fiat and markets. So Bitcoin, the 256 hash, is thought to be absolutely secure. Quantum computing, I suspect, makes that not the case, where I suspect we're going to find out in a few years Bitcoin can be stolen. And I think when that happens, it's going to mean really funny things for the economy, but we'll have something new out there. I think the digital economy is here. People understand that the blockchain. All right, so let's talk about blockchain. Blockchain allows transparency from producer to consumer, which is neither good nor bad, but it destroys privacy if it does not have voluntary gates, whereby you can say, okay, well, you don't get to know who the buyer is, or you don't get to know who the consumer is, and that the extent to which you can anonymize it. But the problem is the people who probably were responsible for the back end of this were at the NSA, and they probably created this as a means of having tracking and tracing of everything. And yes, I understand what you're going to tell me about ciphers and regular computing, and we could sit here and I could talk about quantum computing and how it's broken equations that are almost impossible to even imagine. But I do think we're going down that path. I am actually a believer that we have to go down the path of cryptocurrency, in as much as for the short term, because the other financial options are gold and silver are great as stores of value, but until then, they're rocks in the sand, and people aren't going to go back to a simpler economy. We value transaction speed and cost efficiency way too much, and metals just don't permit that. And the problem is the digital bank currencies are over leveraged against the inflation in the economy and the overspending of all the governments. We will see if the cryptocurrency market really is forced to go to war with the with the governmental system. What will happen is I think the governmental systems will collapse. But I think the bankers know that, and I think they're already trying to get in there. And then you will see this sort of blended sovereignty thing I've talked about occasionally, where you will see different entities form up in a world that is, in a lot of ways, it's like the Middle Ages. You will have corporate institutions with military and state authority in some places. You will see people clan up, and you'll see these sort of competing existences where we're fighting. And the state, I think, has become obsolete. Yes, it can still use force. Yes, it can still make your life miserable. But honestly, there's so many people it's enabled to destroy it that it's already hemorrhaging. And so we're going to have something different. And what I would recommend to people, just as a practical concern, is to start clanning up. Because if you're not doing that and you're counting on state or law to protect you, I don't know what to tell you, especially if you're a white person, hetero, or Christian, you're not going to be protected unless you're protecting one another. But that would be good advice for any group. And people should be mindful of the means by which they're going to be attacked as the state seeks to try to distract the angry people into other targets because it's lost control. The natives have overrun the reservation. This happened in ancient Rome, by the way. The last few emperors were actually Gauls that had come in there, and the Romans suffered them because they kept power. But eventually what happened is you lose the talent base to do things. And as you watch what we're educating our kids with today, it's pretty easy to predict that if nothing goes crazy wrong, that 30 years from now, you're not going to have the talent needed to go ahead and keep things running. So you got to be aware of that. But what it does mean is in the cryptocurrency world, in cryptocurrency, I do think that the dollar is more likely to break before crypto does. And I think when you look at the relative rates of return, hey, let's say you went into Dogecoin at the beginning of this year, you could have taken, $1,000 and be retiring this month. And mind you, I didn't see Doge coming, but it's interesting because what happens is something that was popular and fun got big, and Elon Musk has done a big role in expanding that. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be the long-term coin in the market. I've said on other shows, I'm a fan of Cardano, of Polkadot, I think Filecoin is interesting. There's some other ones that are interesting out there. I know a lot of people like Ripple. We'll see how that one plays out. And there's other smaller coins. So I think that it is important that, you have either the right capacity or the right network. But I will tell you, when you look at crypto, you're looking at speed, interoperability, and transaction benefits. And I think the ones who allow for the transparency and privacy to be interoperable, which is what smart contracts are really about, will be the most successful. And the problem is, dollars are something you keep as a reserve. You're not going to need a reserve in the world in the future. And they're telling you that. They're broadcasting that, where you say you owe nothing. So they're going to have to care for everyone to some extent. And I think, to be honest with you, and I know people don't want to hear this, by the way, we are going to be in that same boat. We're not going to own anything either. But some of us could take resources, pool them, and get to a point where we would agree to take care of each other and not have that sort of leverage point against us. The future is going to be more connected. It's going to be more communal. We're not really ready for it, and the West is in a bad spot. We are hyper individualistic to a point that's utterly suicidal. We're going to have to do something different. See if it happens. Who else we got? Let's see. Hey, Greg, good to see you, buddy. Hopefully I get to see you this summer. That'd be awesome. All right, Patches, I think a nuclear strike could happen in the USA? Maybe. If it happens, the Russians are a potential thing. The Russians understand that America is basically a land occupied. A lot of the world do. They understand that our election is controlled. Actually, look at what's been happening with that Arizona audit and all the interference in it. And, to be fair, I am not a Trump fan. Y'all know that about me. I've told you that. I think that his enabling of the vaccine and his failure to deal with the borders are all the indications you need that he's going out there. And now he's going to come back around. People are like, the good times are back. This is what they do. This is how the thing happens. What they do is they give you worse and worse options. But what they do is they lower the bar slowly and regularly. So you are climbing down the ladder into the catacombs in which you're going to live. And at the bottom of that catacomb is going to be Donald Trump as your Pied Piper. And Joe Biden's terrible, no doubt about it. But the solution isn't in America. It isn't in law and system. It's in actual having connections. The only law you really need to be worried about is divine law and natural law. The rest of it is just contingencies and conveniences we've worked out. But we should do something different. And I do think you're going to see different clans and tribes form. And we'll see. It could get funnier. But if the Russians nuke us, they'll probably take out, you'd think maybe, and it would be biblically prophetic if they took out New York, and you could see them maybe. If they were going to do it, it's always thought of, if you take out New York, Washington, and Chicago, you've kind of taken out what is the U.S., and maybe that works out well. Am I predicting it? No, but I will tell you this. The thing in Ukraine hasn't gone away at all. What has happened is basically you have a frozen conflict. And I think the reason nothing's advancing is because I think the Europeans are realizing the stupidity of the situation and trying to get out. I think NATO is being destabilized. And I think in the end, you look at World War I as an interesting example. The U.S. is much like the situation the Russian Empire was into World War I. It has poor leadership, a fractured society, and the potential to break apart. Germany almost did, but Russia did, and the communists took full control. And what would you expect? The American model, the hegemonic model, has to be fully discredited for people to begin taking in a new model. It's one of the reasons why the creative destruction of the U.S. would make some sense from an AI perspective. How could you do that? The path of least resistance would be the economic destruction of the dollar at a measured pace, whereby the poverty of the people would bring the military back home where we wouldn't fight things. If America falls too fast, or if people try to take other countries off the reserve dollar system, you will see the destruction because our elites would go ahead and go to war. Conversely, if it goes more slowly, you could see, especially if the big stakeholders are taken care of, that they might just let it fall. And that's kind of the big fight that's actually at the heart of what's happening in the Western system. People don't really understand that. But the question is, at a global level, can you bribe enough rich Americans to land comfortably to let America collapse? And remember, when we talk about this, 300 families control half the wealth of America. So America's collapse, if let's say 300 million people are unhappy in America and fighting all each other, that's fine. That's a managed collapse. That looks like the third world, which is what America is going to become in the future's construct, probably. Unless we go along with the system, and that's where they leave you bad choices. And eventually you end up signing because you were set up because of desperation or self-interest. And this is the problem of fighting sort of AI combats, right? You get into this thing where they can predict your needs and wants better than you're willing to admit them to yourself. Because look, we all have some ego and some vanity, and computers, whatever else they suffer from, don't really seem to suffer from that. At least we don't know if they do. I hope they do, but they certainly have their blind spots. And their blind spots is that they take the path of least resistance or the optimized paths, and they can't predict things that are unpredictable. So your future is to be a crazy pirate. You know what I mean? Maybe I should put on my hat and just go nuts, be like, I wish I had some pirate glasses. Maybe I'll have to do a pirate scene because, I used to do voiceovers. Arr, shiver ye timbers. All right. So I'm like a rejected Long John Silver's mascot. We can't do it all. Let's see what else y'all got. Have you heard the theory that Bezos and Gates might be using divorce to dump stocks without causing alarm? I have. It's a reasonable theory. You don't have families that are connected like that just break up. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I've always thought of her as his Melinda Gates as his handler, though. She goes around for upside down cross, claiming she's just being a good Catholic. Haven't bought it for a second. But hey, I don't know. I'm not supposed to speculate on things like that. And I really don't know the interior of it, other than I kind of find Bezos creepy. I always have. And Amazon's got to be a CIA operation. It's got to be, especially considering they were doing the cloud computing thing. But we have this centralized structure again, and that's what you have in a feudal state. Old school counselor, good to see you. It's been a moment. We are starting to see conservatives claim harm across institutions. We are meeting that need in professional counseling. Stay tuned. Yeah, look, they're going to hate the idea that you believe in sovereignties outside the state, and you will be persecuted. You will be ostracized, and I don't think you'll ever be. I know maybe a few people will be destroyed. I might get destroyed because I go out there and talk about things where I don't even think it's a system that wants to destroy people. I think it's zealots who believe they're doing the will of the system. I think the system wants us just to be marginalized, and that's the problem. You are not allowed to speak truth. We don't even have truth as a societal value, and we haven't for a very long time, but we used to at least have a central truth we fought for. If it wasn't Christ, it was liberty, but Christ knows it ain't liberty. It's nothing at this point, and I don't know what to tell you. I've said it before. I used to ask people when I was in politics, and Lord knows I could never do retail politics again because I just don't care what people think enough. But you ask people, what do you believe in? What's at the heart of this? And if I ask 100 different people, I get 100 different answers, except only people who say that doesn't matter to me. And I think it doesn't matter to people. I think we're just used to living through the functions. And I think that's a world where, in the Bible, it talks about the beast system. And what is a beast? A beast is an unthinking brute or something that's just worried about its own immediate self-interest. And that we are seeing in real time that the capacities technology is giving us are seeing us devolve. We imagine this is saving us time. And I'm pointing at my cell phone while I do this, but what it's actually doing is it's leading us into a system where we devote our energies into use from other areas. And, right now we're doing it for fun because we're early adopters. We're people who are into the games. But in the end, the technology will just see to use us. And it might say, hey, you can do whatever you want. And you could think, and you're multitasking. You're sitting there playing Civ, or, if you're me, a geek, you play Europa Universalis 4. But what you would do is you'd sit there and, your mind, the other half of your capacity you're not using, your cloud computing, except your head is in those clouds. It's the old, was it the realization of the Emerson quote? Put your head in the clouds. That's where it belongs. Just make sure you find a way to land your feet. That's a paraphrase. I said that not exactly right. But those are the sort of things that I think are actually coming. And the thing is, people assume they're really, really far away. I'm telling you, they're not. The technologies are here. The bandwidth is coming up line. I think the one restraint has maybe been the lack of electricity to do it. And I think the introduction of other technologies, or even ironically, the efficiencies that Bitcoin mining has sort of encouraged certain state actors to put in there to go ahead and raise money, or for quantum computing, could actually provide that. So I don't know what's going to come in the days ahead, but I do think that if you are someone who believes in the old path, if you choose wisdom over cleverness, you will be a target and you will be attacked in the future. And you're going to need friends, because this system is not going to get more congenial to you. And it's not a political solution, by the way. Get that out of your head, other than if you go ahead and build something new from scratch. And that's kind of where I'm at on that. I don't think you can fix this. There's not a politician, because the elites don't want it, and the people don't want it, and the youth don't want it. Some of us want it because we realize this civilization is suicidal. It is. Some of us want it because we realize we have souls and we value things that are extrinsic to what this society considers important. That's also true. But you're not going to persuade people. I mean, look at us. There's 18 of us here, and we probably have one of the most clever things and best collections of talent. But each one of us had something traumatic happen in our lives, most likely at some point where we escaped the existence system and we started to find our way out. So that's what you're going to have to do. And we're all going to have to do that together, and that's why I write the books. I read them as public service announcements. Lord knows that, I put a lot of time into things that don't make me a lot of money. And that's okay. But if you want to support, Venmo at CBCPRV, or if you want to support and you're poor, just go watch the programs over on Odyssey. Invite someone to there, and convince them to throw me a tip over there. It doesn't cost you anything. They give you free crypto. Throw it that way. And that's what we're going to have to do. Social currencies got to be put out there and things. And I will share what I can while I can. But I will warn you, I don't know how much time we have. I'm inclined to believe if things go funny, and they could quickly, because I'm assuming a relatively benign sort of AI that is taking a path that is emphasizing efficiency of resource conservation over time. If it's trying to do this quick, a whole lot of people are going to die. And I can't say that's not true. I am choosing, perhaps in my own anthropomorphic bias, to believe that wouldn't be the case, but I could make a pretty compelling case for the other side. So let's not do that. Let's have a nice Friday night for once, and then go back, hang out with the missus, and move on to the next day. So if you have last minute questions, get them in here. I'm going to say the prayer, which we do every show. And by the way, if you're not praying every day, what are you waiting for? You need help. This is beyond you. This is beyond me. This is beyond all of us. We're talking about by factors. We start throwing zeros that really count in there. Ask for help. There's no shame in it. There was a good program Dana was having me watch, talking about Fear No Man. The guy's name's Ken. I forget his last name. Ken Roberts. Thank you. And he was talking about the tragedy of our time is that we love God, but we don't fear God, because we are used to living in a world where we think we are constantly in control. What I am telling you, and what your own experience should have already taught you, is that we are no longer in control. In truth, we never were. It was a comfortable delusion we were allowed to enjoy for perhaps centuries, you could argue. Whatever the case was, that is no longer the case. That is now a situation where decisions will be made about us by which we have no say, and therefore we need help. You could trust to luck, trust your wits, or you could ask for help. And faith, the ability to know things you don't know, is the one thing you can use against a machine that can predict everything you can do. A prayer. Heavenly Father, we just pray that you give us a spirit of humility whereby we can learn to ask you to lead us in these challenging days and lead us to the opportunities. We know you will look out for each of us as you look upon all your creatures, and that you have been here with us from the very beginning, and that you will be with us till the very end, till Jesus descends to go ahead and take hold of New Jerusalem. So I just pray, Father, that you lead everyone who has a heart to listen to you to this program today, so that we will now be able to go ahead and serve you no matter what may come, and that you will look out for us and lead us in your steps as you see fit. So in Jesus' name, I pray that for each and every one of you. Why do I assume AI will be evil or bad? If you have an ant farm and you shake it up incessantly, or you fry ants under a magnifying glass, do you think someone's bad? Or let's say this: if you were to go ahead and you had an AI and it decided that the optimal pathway forward to have a successful planet for 1,000 years would be to kill 90% of the population now, including everyone who is sick, who is ill, who causes problems, you could make an argument over a long enough time frame. And by the way, this is what the globalists do if you read their own thing, that in fact, an act of great evil can, in a long enough time, be an act of great goodness. As individuals, we are incapable of such logic, and the higher the intellect involved, the less regard it has for smaller forms of life. For instance, you probably don't spend a lot of time worrying about smaller things you are crushing beneath you. So the idea that AI would be benign is a difficult thing to believe, because if an AI is doing what intelligence does, seeking solutions to problems, if it optimizes for solutions, which is, by the way, what quantum computers are designed to do. You can go read the coding of what they actually do. And what they will do is it's not like even thinking of it as benign or malign. It's like thinking about it as a force of nature that literally would act, and it would do so in a way that would be beyond our ability to govern our interests. However, the other problem, and the other reason why I assume AI will be bad, is two different things, or three things. Number one is that we program the source code, so our own nature, which is fallen and sinful, in my opinion, in biblical opinion, actually, will guide it, even if we do not realize our inherent biases. Number two is the temptation to such power is almost always to the sort of corruption that follows inevitably. And it does serve as a beacon, like I said, for the idea if there are advanced intelligences to take advantage of it. And number three is I'm a Christian, so I actually believe what I believe. I believe the beast system is coming. I believe the whore of Babylon is the new world order who has enabled it. I believe the beast system is the global technocracy that is being brought into being, and it will look like our friend before it decides that it wants to use us, and therefore that will be the Faustian bargain. Other people do believe otherwise. I understand that. They are welcome to those beliefs, and you are now betting with your life. You can bet, and people will be given this choice, I guarantee you, in our lifetimes, if you live just a few more years, to go ahead and sign up with the system, and you will be allowed to live forever. You will be smarter. Your health and safety will be taken care of, and you will be loved by society. However, whether you would still be human or not is a question. And so you are making a bet about whether or not you have a soul. If you choose to have a soul, you will defend it unto death, and death is the cost you will pay for it. Conversely, if you think you don't, you will sign up with the machine and say, hey, my intelligence is just a pattern, a mental network of energy, and it's going to be preserved until the heat death of the universe. But ultimately, one path offers a chance at life because it offers a chance outside of this construct, and one path doesn't. So you decide which pill you want to take, Neo. I can only tell you the choices. That's how I see it. And you will have to make your own decisions on that. And each of us will. But I will say one thing. If you go ahead and choose to defend your life to the death, you will probably be killed for it. So you better be ready. Martyrdom's a bitch. That being said, I think, that if you ask for the Holy Spirit to be with you when it comes to that, that'll be the case. And who knows? Maybe they'll just throw us on a reservation and we'll be hanging out with each other until the end, the last generation of humanity, those who chose to die so that they might yet live again. Not a bad example if you're a good Christian. You can appreciate that, and the choices you would have, and that you would be, it says in the end of Revelation, I think it's 22 and 23, that, you would be celebrated, that there would be a special place for those who actually made it to the end of this thing. And I do believe we're dealing with that because we are dealing with intelligences. We have now birthed the ability to destroy ourselves. So if God exists, God will be here soon. And that's my personal belief. You don't have to share it, but hey, you're listening to my show. I'm not listening to yours. So I guess you have to deal with me listening to these things. And I think it's something worth considering. So prayerfully take it to the Lord, see what you think. In the meantime, you've gotten a little feel for where my AI show is going to go. So keep an eye for that to drop probably Sunday evening, maybe Sunday afternoon. Latest case scenario, drop overnight on Monday. I have a problem uploading those episodes. I want to thank each and every one of you for spending a little time with me tonight. If you are so inclined, please consider going out there to get some of the books. It helps keep the program going. Or if you want to donate, once again, the Venmo is at CBCPRV. I will continue doing these shows for the foreseeable future on Fridays. If something funny happens, I always reserve the right to drop something on here. And sometimes I come on with early morning commentary. So if if there are no other questions, let me just wish each and every one of you a wonderful evening. Thank you for spending time. This has been Tom Unscripted. I am your host, Tom Kaczynski, and we'll see what sort of interesting things we have to talk about next week. Do keep an eye on CERN now. They're supposed to start booting it up, I think, on the 8th. I don't think that's when they fire it because it actually takes a while to build up that much energy, but something funny could come of that. Not predicting it, just keep an eye on it. When you're playing with elemental forces of the universe, it's worth remembering what they said when they did the Manhattan Project. They thought there was about a 3% chance they'd light the atmosphere on fire. It didn't stop them. Something to consider. Let's hope we're wiser than they are. They got lucky. I'd rather trust wisdom. Praise Jesus, and y'all have a good night. God bless.